Okay, welcome everybody. Today we're going to have a really short tutorial on how to make a little spinner for your command line applications in Python. So let's get started. If you enjoy this content, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel. I'd appreciate it. Okay, so let's make a new file, and I'm going to call this CLI_spinner. You can call it whatever you want, .py. And inside of this file, we're going to use a couple of libraries. So import the multi-processing library. Let's import time. And let's create a class called CLI Spinner. And that's our command line interface spinner class. And we will initialize that. And I want to pass in a few things when we create this object. So let's create a message, and we'll set that default to empty, an empty string, and we can have a speed. So what this is going to do is this will let us control the speed when we create the spinner. We can control the message like loading or project running or whatever. And we're going to store these as class variables. So we'll have self.message equals message, self.speed equals speed. And then we're going to want to create a process, and the process is going to be the actual, displaying of the spinning thing. So let's have self.process equals, and we'll do multi-threading processing.process. And then let's create a target, and we'll call this target spin, self.spin, because this is going to be a class function. And we're not going to require any arguments for that. And we'll name that as CLI Spinner so we can identify what that process is. We haven't created this function spin yet, which is what we will do. So we're going to need a couple of functions for this spinner class. We're going to need the spin function, and what this is going to do is this is going to be a process that we're going to turn on, and it's going to display the spinner, and we're going to create this as a process so that we can do other things while the spinner is running. And we'll have a start, and we'll have a stop, because we're going to want to be able to start and stop this thing in code. So let's think about what we need to do. So for the start function, we're going to want to start the process. So that's going to be pretty simple. So we're just going to call self.process.start. And what that will do is when we create a process from the multi-processing library, that has two commands, start and terminate. Start will start the process, terminate will end the process. And what we can do is we also want to stop this thing, but what we want to do is we want to make sure that a process exists and is running. So what we can do for stop is if not self.process.isAlive. So it's going to check, is there a process, is the process alive? If it's not alive, we don't want to stop it because it's not running. So if it's not alive, then we want to print maybe just a warning and just say warning, CLI spinner is not running. This is just kind of a debug warning, won't really cause a problem. And then otherwise, we want to actually terminate that. So we'll do self.process.terminate, and we can print a blank line. So what this will do is if there is a process and it is alive, meaning it's running, this will terminate it. Otherwise, you'll just get a warning that the spinner wasn't running and you tried to stop it. Not a big deal. So this is pretty simple stuff. So now we have to actually create the function that's going to cause the spinning display. So if we were to run this now, we could start a process, it would run this function, and it would just end immediately because it doesn't do anything yet. So now we actually have to do the spinning part. So we're going to create a spinner, and this is where we're going to use some characters to create the visual effect. So you're all familiar with this. So we'll do kind of that spinning, spinning bar by using these characters here in this order. And you could use any characters you want. Obviously, you could use letters, numbers to make it silly, but this will give the appearance of a spinning bar, and this will loop over and over again. So those are our characters in sequential order. And then we'll say n equals 0, n meaning the index of the spinner that we want to display. And we'll just say while true, we're going to print a formatted string. And in the string, so this is where we want to use this \r ASCII code. What this is going to do is this is going to take the cursor and put it back to the beginning of the line, and this way it will type over the previous one. Without this, we can do this without this first, and then you can see what we're trying to do. So first we'll display the message. So if there's a message, we'll display the message, and then we can display spinner of n. So we can call one of these indexes. So if it's 0, it'll display this character. If it's 1, it'll display this character. Okay, we can display the correct character. And then we want to do another thing here. We want to do end equals this. If we don't do this, it's going to add a return carriage, which we can not do this, so you can see why we're doing that. And then of course we want to do n plus equals 1. We want to increment that, and then we want to say if n is greater than or equal to the length of spinner, then we want to reset n back to 0. That way it loops back around. And then this is where we can implement the speed of the spinner. We'll say time.sleep, and we can put in our self.speed. So this speed variable that we created up here will let us control how long it sleeps between each of these loop iterations. Whoops, make sure that is inside of your loop. And that way we can speed this thing up, slow it down. So let's create a little if underscore name equals underscore main, just so we can test this thing out. And what we can do is we can create a spinner. So we'll say spinner equals CLI underscore spinner, and we can define a string hello ... and we can put in a speed of 0.2. And what we can do is we can say spinner.start and then time.sleep. Let's do this for 5 seconds. We'll test the spinner out for 5 seconds. So because it's a process, we'll be able to continue executing code. So I can print, your code here. So this is where we could do other things while the spinner is running, and then we can stop the spinner. So we'll do spinner.stop, which will call the terminate on that process. So let's run this. So you can see, because we're not using those ASCII codes that take us back, it's working properly, but it's not rewriting it over the same line to give you that visual effect. So let's go back and fix that. So here's why we're doing this with the string. If we go back to our format string, first thing we want to do is we want to use the \r character. Oops. This is the escape key that will return it'll take you all the way back to the beginning of that line. So it's going to reprint that line over and over again on top of itself. And if we run it now, though, we're still going to have a problem. You can still see it's not working. And the reason is that when we create this string, it's also adding a return carriage at the end. But we can override that in the print function. So we can say end equals, and we can say nothing. So don't put a character on the end. By default, that's going to add a new line, which is why it's going to keep going to a new line. So now what's going to happen is every time it prints this, it's not going to add a new line. And the first thing it's going to do is return all the way to the front and overwrite the previous string. So let's check that out. And there you go. So we have hello, and we have our spinner working. And you can see that our code is running, as I mentioned before. So because this is a process, if we had a loop in here or other things happening in here, all this stuff is going to be executing. So you can see it's going to execute that code while the spinner is running as another process. After 5 seconds, it's going to stop that process. So that, in a nutshell, is how we can quickly, easily create a spinner class that can be used on your code. I hope you found this tutorial useful and informative. If you did, please like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And I hope to see you again in another video. Thanks.